Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of the Beyond Cancer series, sponsored by Epic Experience. My name is Gail, aka Sunshine, and I will be your host for today. Our topic today is living with stage 4 cancer, and we have 3 survivors who are going to join us momentarily. First, I just want to tell you a little bit about Epic Experience and the Beyond Cancer series. So, if you're new, Epic Experience was started in 2012 by Nancy Farrow after her oldest son was diagnosed with cancer, went through the protocol, and then really had a hard time getting back on track, suffered from depression and some other things. And he was able to attend a program that really helped him gain a new perspective and kind of get back on track. And that program was specifically for young adults. And Nancy thought, everybody needs this, not just young adults. So that's how Epic Experience was born. And since then, we've had about 500 campers attend the week-long camps. Right now, we actually have a waiting list of over 1,000. I think it's actually closer to 2,000. And so as part of that, we tried to come up with other programs to reach out to people who haven't been able to actually attend a camp yet. And that's how this series came into being, through the alumni team. The alumni team is made up of, I believe there are 9 of us right now, alumni who have attended camps at different times. We all have different kinds of cancer, different ages, different states. And we are really focused on trying to keep together the community that started at camp. So that's where this Beyond Cancer series was born. It's also sponsored by Hazel, a pharmaceutical company. We want to thank them for helping us put this together. The series has covered a multitude of topics, and in the last few weeks, we've been doing it weekly because of the COVID situation, and we want to provide more online content for people. So again, this week we're going to be talking about living with stage 4 cancer, and we're going to have 3 survivors, and hopefully they can join me now, and we'll let them introduce themselves to you, and then we will have a Q&A. If you're watching, also, there's a place to leave comments. Go ahead and leave comments, and they will be put on the screen, and we all can see them, and we can answer them and include that in part of the conversation. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to let each of you introduce yourself, talk about where you're from, what your camp name is, and when you attended camp. Okay, and Hazel, why don't we start with you?
Okay. My name is Hazel, aka Hazelnut, and I live in Golden, Colorado. I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in 2014 and went to camp June of 2014. I was diagnosed March 5th of 2014. So just a few months after I was diagnosed, I decided to go to camp, and Epic Experience changed my life, to say the least. So definitely a great opportunity for me.
Awesome. And Paige?
I went to camp in just last summer. It was July of last year. It was amazing. I'm a stud from camp. I live in Colorado. I just moved to Estes Park actually from Denver. So I'm living in the mountains now. And I was originally diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer in 2016. And then almost 2 years to the date, really, I got my stage 4 diagnosis where the cancer had spread to my right ilium bone. And since then, I've had no sign of active disease. We did radiation. I've had my ovaries since removed because I have estrogen positive cancer, but no sign of active disease for quite a while now. So I'm pretty grateful for that.
Awesome. And what's your camp nickname?
Wildflower.
Wildflower, that's right. Yeah. And Stud, please tell us about yourself.
I'm Lewis, Lou, aka Stud. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area all my life, and I was diagnosed in January of 2016 and went to Epic Camp in summer of 17, so a year and a half after that. And again, as these 2 fine ladies spoke ahead of me, Epic just changed my life.
So. Yeah, awesome. Well, and you kind of led right into my next one. I wanted to talk a little bit about diagnosis because we're specifically talking about stage 4 cancer. You've already mentioned the year, I think all of you did. What happened next? So if you kind of build on that for each of you, like once you were diagnosed, what happened next in terms of your treatment? Was there surgery? Were there second opinions? Kind of what happened next in terms of that? And I'm going to let you guys just kind of jump in and fight for the next spot. How's that?
Sure.
Ladies first.
Unless I have to pick you.
I can share.
Thank you.
When I was first diagnosed, like I said, it was stage 1. I was 25. I kind of had a mastectomy and then kind of went back to my life. Didn't seem like I mean, obviously it was a big deal, but looking
right
at a stage 4 diagnosis, I kind of have the two to compare with each other. And I mean, after my initial diagnosis, 2 years later, so it's still pretty fresh getting back to life. And then you get like news that it's a totally different, it's the same cancer, thankfully, I guess, but
well, yeah,
now, so we have to monitor that. But I think that I definitely got a lot of second opinions the first time around before I decided to have a single mastectomy. And then actually the second time when I turned metastatic, it was kind of more like life or death for me. I saw it in that way, and I kind of acted in ways that were much more drastic and I might not have done had I not already been through it once. But I actually moved. I was living in Colorado since I was first diagnosed. I moved around a bunch, and I was able to move back to Cleveland to go to the Cleveland Clinic and get a specialist there that specialized in young women with metastatic breast cancer and the whole deal. But up to that point where I made it there, I had like 7 different opinions and like all different kinds of chemo, that different doctors, that all kinds of people that just had given me their advice and all that, which was, I was very grateful for. But it's almost harder when you have too many opinions to make sense. But I definitely was like really grateful that I could go back to Cleveland to get monitored there. I have family there. I grew up there. So there was that. And then I think the other big change that I made in my life was my diet. The second time I've changed to mostly plant-based, avoiding like sugar. I'm mostly eating organic, avoiding processed flours. And the first time around, I didn't really feel that sense of urgency on that. The second time around, that was kind of like the big difference that I noticed was I changed my complete lifestyle in order to fight cancer.
Yeah. And I'm going to add a follow-up question. What is your protocol now? Like, are you on seeing every 3 months, and the other, both of you can answer this as well, but kind of what's your plan now?
Yeah. So I was thankfully, after my first set of scans following, I think it was about 4 months from when I initially had the first PET scan and found it, I had radiation and pretty much that got rid of it, thankfully.
Yeah.
After that, I've had my ovaries removed because I had estrogen positive cancer. So that was like a choice that I made. I didn't have to do that. And then I have to I'm on chemotherapy. So it's a oral chemo that is with the estrogen. So I don't lose my hair and things like that, like most people would think. But and it doesn't make me necessarily immunocompromised, but I'm going to be on that for the rest of my life until pretty much, I don't know what the next option would be because I haven't asked that question yet. I don't know if I like it there, but basically until my body can't support this one anymore. And monthly blood work and then scans every 6 months now.
Wow. Hazel or Lewis, how about you?
Yeah. So, when I was diagnosed in 2014, I had absolutely no symptoms. I was 100% asymptomatic. I was running marathons. I was about as healthy as I could ever be. And just happened to go to the doctor for another problem, and they were doing an abdominal scan. And by just the luck of the scan, just happened to catch the bottom part of my left lower lobe of my lung, and I got a call and said, your kidney and your bladder look great, but you have a large solid mass in your left lower lobe. And I'm thinking, I don't even understand what left lower lobe means. I mean, I'm a nurse, I know what that is, but I couldn't piece it together. And unfortunately, lung cancer comes with a really big stigma. I mean, people with lung cancer are pretty much all assumed that they're smokers or past smokers, and I'm a never smoker. So even I fell into that, and the first thing I thought of was, how can I have lung cancer? Of all the cancers out there, how could I have lung cancer? And pretty much you learn that day that anybody with lungs can get lung cancer. So you don't have to be a smoker. So the only silver lining in my diagnosis was I have a mutation, an ALK mutation that only 3%, 3 to 4% of lung cancer people have. And that was a total game changer. That allows me to have targeted therapy. And targeted therapy just means that this medicine that I'm on targets the mutation within my cancer cell, so it doesn't affect all the other cells in my body. So I've been on targeted therapy for the last 6 years, because I was diagnosed in 2014. I'm on my third targeted therapy, but knock on wood, I'm doing great, feel great. When I was first diagnosed, I really never wanted a second opinion, because I'm going to UC Health. And I just know that UC Health is one of the great teaching hospitals in Colorado. In fact, it is a huge cancer center, world renowned. And people come to UC Health for their second opinion. And I'm going there, because I'm lucky enough to have doctors that are working on trying to figure out how to stop lung cancer.
Right.
So I've been very fortunate with the care that I've gotten, and very, very happy. And I feel great. Side effects are there, but they're manageable.
Yeah. And like Paige, will you be on this for the foreseeable future? Is that?
Yeah, forever.
Yeah.
So I go see the doctor every 6 weeks. I see the doctor, and I get scanned every 3 months. So I get brain MRI and chest abdominal CT every 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Louis?
Yeah, so I've got somewhat a similar path as what Hazel went through, although I'm only 4.5 years in versus her 6 years. I also went in to get checked just because I had another weird symptom. I was always very healthy, very active, worked out regularly, no significant health issues. And then one morning I woke up with a kind of a tingly left arm, and I thought maybe I slept funny on it.
Yeah.
It went away that day. Next day came back again, and a little more constant. And I even mentioned to my wife, Deb, and after breakfast went to the gym and started getting more tingly, more swollen, more numb, and lost strength in it. Ran into Kaiser, and they swarmed me. I guess they were thinking left arm numbness, probably some kind of heart attack, right? I never even thought about it.
Yeah.
And anyway, so what they determined from there is the reason I had numbness in the arm was because of a blood clot, upper arm blood clot, as well as ultimately a pulmonary embolism in my lung as well. So that's another blood clot in there.
Yeah.
And we were very fortunate that we had the chief of the emergency department there, and he kind of scratched his head and said, well, it's great. We're going to give you, Coumadin and, for the blood, it's a blood thinner, but it just doesn't make sense, completely out of the blue. So they admitted me within 5 days there at Kaiser, and I'm laughing away with everybody. Friends are coming over, watching Warriors games, eating pizza and everything else.
Right.
But towards the end of that week, though, I was given the great news that I had a cancer of the thymus gland, which is in the chest there, and the specific disease state is thymic carcinoma. And there are probably 5 different levels of thymus cancers. Of course, I've got the worst one, and unfortunately with a horrible prognosis, at least statistically.
Right.
So it's a tough one.
And
in this last 4.5 years, I've gone through 2 different chemo infusion regimens, 3 different oral chemos. Like Hazel, I took genetic testing. I also have a weird mutation as well called c-KIT, and that has allowed me to have some targeted therapy as well. And so the last one actually lasted 2.5 years before it finally waned off. And I'm on a new one that I just started 2 months ago. And in fact, next week I take my first scan to see how well that's going to do. But but I mean, my quality of life has been really fortunate. I mean, it's got some side effect issues and all that too, but energy-wise, I'm still able to work out and do epic yoga and some of the low impact and high impact training or so. But yeah, I've been very fortunate that I haven't succumbed to all the brutal side effects or the short-termness of this particular rare cancer. And yeah, I mean, I follow along with other thymic carcinoma patients who are in a support group. And so I hear the plethora and the range of who's tolerating what, who's tried what different protocol. And, so it's been kind of a wild ride for sure.
Yeah. I'm curious, when each of you were officially diagnosed as stage 4, so Paige, this would have been your second time. How did the doctor explain to you what stage 4 is? Or did they, you know what I mean? Did they use a word like terminal, that's what stage 4 is? I'm wondering, or if somebody even wants to explain the staging in case there's somebody watching who doesn't. But I'm curious specifically how they explained stage 4 to you when they told you. Anyone?
They didn't really say that it was terminal. I think they basically said that the reason that it was stage 4 is that in the lungs, my main primary tumor is on my left side. So if it has jumped over to the right side, that makes it stage 4, because if you can have all kinds of tumors on your left side, doesn't matter. But if it's jumped over to the opposite side, you then become stage 4. So that's kind of how they explained it. I asked them about a prognosis, and they gave me 2 years and basically said that, you probably have about 2 years left. And, of course, I just said that, I just celebrated 6 years, so, which is great. But I think that, with the medicines out there and the research, I think that you can't really give anybody a number. Prognosis is just a number. And that's what I think the takeaway is for the prognosis number is when my husband and I heard that, of course, we were absolutely devastated. And you do start making life's plans based on that. But I almost feel like I wish I didn't hear that number, because I think that your mind goes in a bad place immediately. I've been in a really good place and have had pretty good quality of life for 6 years. And I know the other shoe will drop. I know that. That's just the nature of the beast with stage 4. But, I think that I might not have done certain things in my life, based on the 2-year prognosis.
Interesting.
Actually, for me, I really don't remember them ever calling it stage 4 or terminal. But when they describe, and mini background, I have actually spent the last 25 years in the business of oncology. So I'm in and out of cancer clinics and major health, institutions all around. So I'm somewhat familiar. And plus I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, so really smart now. but the fact that in the description of how they were explaining what went on, yes, the main mass was my thymus gland, but it had spread to my sternum, my lung, my liver, as well as in my brain as well. So it's stage 4 or stage 10, I don't care what it is, it's spread and extremely aggressive. So I didn't need anyone to define it for me. I did my damnedest to stay away from looking up what the prognosis was, and Dr. Google, because I knew it was bad. And again, in my 25 plus years in the business, I nor any of my colleagues never had even heard of this cancer. So it is that rare, so it was definitely challenging for sure.
Yeah. Paige, anything else for you?
Yeah, when they called me, it was I found all the tumors that I found, all the tumors that I've had, I found them and went looking to figure out what it was. I've only had one benign, but this one was in my hip bone, and they sent me all around. So I wasn't really I wasn't in the oncology unit. I was at the Kaiser with some new doctors, thought nothing of it. And then when they switched me to oncology, it was just to get basic monitoring. So my oncologist was not a specialist in breast cancer or metastatic breast cancer or anything like that. So actually, when he called me, I asked him if the news came in the night before my birthday, basically, not to call me until after the weekend. And he actually called me. It was also my bachelorette party weekend. My sister was like on a flight coming to Denver, and he called me the night before the birthday and the bachelorette party. And I could hear, we were waiting, like unsure. So we had it on speakerphone. My husband and I were listening, and he's in his car, actually. You could hear his turn signal. He was driving home from work, and he called me, and it was like the worst. I mean, I know a diagnosis is bad, but like, probably, I wanted to tell him that basically when he told me that I had stage 4 cancer, and with that, when the cancer spreads, it was the same pathology on my cancer. So it was the same as when it was in my breast, it moved to my bone, same pathology, stage 4, and it metastasized, it spread to another spot. So it's stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. He told me that my husband asked the question, long-term prognosis, and he said, probably about 3 years. I'd be surprised if you were alive in 20. And so the funny thing is, though, with breast cancer is like, there's such old data, and Stud said this before, the statistical number is different than, my quality of life is great. And I think that knowing that number, hearing 3 years, especially it's the day before my 28th birthday, was super upsetting and terrifying. And I honestly did lose my hope there for a couple weeks before I realized, like, this is just some stat that this guy just pulled out of his pocket because he's been quoting the statistic for how long, and who knows. So now I like to contribute to any research I can, because there's not a lot of young people with this disease for them to have accurate numbers. And like Hazel said too, that number is, I wish I had never heard that too, because I think that like my oncologist now says, we're going to be dealing with this kind of stuff for decades. And when I hear that, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, that's better than 3 years. So it's definitely effective on it. And that factor of hope was definitely something that the way that he presented that information to me was just not great.
Yeah, I can imagine. You kind of led right into the next thing I was going to ask is your initial thoughts when you hear. You shared a little bit, but I want to make sure. And hope. Paige, you just said you lost hope partly because of the way he presented it to you. I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts, or both Hazel and Lewis. What were your initial, other than the stomach dropping and feeling like your head's buzzing and not hearing anything else for a while, what was your initial reaction?
I think for me, it was like such a confusing time, because like I said, it was leading into like my bachelorette weekend. So while I was out of town, my dad and my husband were like planning a whole new diet and a whole new lifestyle. And I think it's just like a really intense, like big thing that, if I gave advice to someone, I would say, as hard as it could be, to just kind of sit with it for a little bit. Like I said, I completely lost my hope for like almost 3 weeks. And it definitely, like, my mood, like everything was, which makes sense. It's after a huge diagnosis. But that was one thing that I wish I had held on to, because that wasn't his decision to take that away from me. And I felt like in the way that he delivered that to me, that was the case. But I think now I'm going on 2.5 years, no sign of active disease. I'm doing great. My quality of life is really good, considering all the chemo and side effects that I could be having. It's not necessarily anywhere near as bad as it could be. So I think that the initial thoughts, though, are just pretty dark, and it takes some time to get through that dark space to find the light. But that little piece of hope, even if it's like the tiniest little crumb left, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that, when I initially heard that, of course, with everybody else, it's just this awful, shocking thing. And literally my husband and I think we cried every day for a month, just every day we just sat and cried for a month. And then you just start thinking that every day that you sit down and cry, you've just wasted a day crying, that and you just got given 2 years. So you just wasted that whole month, there's 30 days down the drain. So, when I heard that, the first thing that went through my mind, which is, probably really weird, is I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to see my girls in a wedding dress. I'm never going to be a grandmother. I'm never going to see my grandkids. And so one of the good things that came out of that, when I actually picked myself up and just thought, okay, you cannot just sit here and cry all the time. You know, you don't know. I mean, I'm 6 years out, but you don't know when, like I said, that other shoe is going to drop. So I did. You know what I did? I took my girls to a bridal store. And I thought, I'm not going to wait, you know, because who knows when they're going to get married, if they're going to get married. So, I mean, as a mother, at least for me, I always dreamt about seeing my girls in a wedding dress. And so I just made an appointment and we went, and the girls got to dress up in wedding gowns that I'll never be able to afford, which was really fun. We went out and had lunch and had ice cream and made a huge day of it. And it was a bittersweet day, but it was great. And you have to just do things like that, in my opinion, just not wait for things and not be sad that you're never going to do it. Well, you know what? You've got now to do things. So do things with your kids or your significant other, your friends, or whatever you want to do. And if you live another 20 years, that's great. You have more time to play, you know, but if you don't, you know, try not to have any regrets about things like that. Cause I would have had regrets if I'd never done that. And now, you know, if they do get married and I'm around to see them in their dress, at least they know what style they like. So, you know, they've done the preliminary. Yeah. So I'm glad I did that. Yeah.
You know, when I was first told about my cancer, I knew how serious it was, but I don't think it really hit me until the evening that we came home from the hospital. And I know my head was it was in a fog, and it's like, you know, we came in, the house was somewhat dark and all. And then my cell phone, you know, rang, and it was one of my buddies who had called. He was calling from a restaurant, just checking in. You know, he had been to the hospital before, amongst many others as well. He just called to check in. And I just remember, you know, kindness of his heart, asking how I was doing. And all of a sudden it just hit me like a brick wall. And I was like choked up and tears started flowing, and I couldn't utter a word. I ended up just kind of hanging up on him. And I know that he felt horribly, you know, and he was out for dinner with other friends and all that too. But, you know, and I think the next couple weeks or so, I was just kind of swimming around, not knowing what I was going to do, what the future was going to hold. You know, and for me, I mean, it wasn't until I went back to church. Yeah, and I was never one that went every week kind of thing. You know, the CEO, Christmas and Easter only kind of thing. But I went there on my own, and over the course of a couple different weeks, a couple different Sundays, I just found myself breaking down and crying in the middle of the services. And, you know, and I guess it was a cleansing of sorts. But coming out of that, you know, it somehow kind of rediscovering my faith kind of gave me a sense of comfort. And it wasn't that I was necessarily going to change the outcome, the ultimate outcome, but it allowed me to kind of accept my situation, my status, and, you know, and I don't have any regrets in my life. We've done a lot over our lives, and, you know, we traveled the world and everything else, and great network of friends and family. And I'm in a good place now, but I mean, it wasn't until that point that, you know, things started kind of turning around for me and accepting of it. So,
yeah, it sounds like all three of you had family with you, at least your significant other, when you heard. Is that right? How did you go about telling kids, if you have them, or Paige, your sister or other family members? How did you go about telling those who were closest to you this tough news?
Well, you know, when I was diagnosed in March, my oldest daughter, Allie, was getting ready to graduate at Texas A&M. And I knew that she had just a couple more months to go. And it was right before finals. My youngest one, Mia, was at CSU. And it was right before finals time. And I thought, there's just no way I'm going to tell them right before they take finals. I just didn't know what that would have done. And I wasn't going to want to be responsible for their grades plummeting or not graduating with honors or whatever the case was. So I actually didn't tell them. And we drove down to Texas for Allie's graduation. And I started on my medicine, and I was really, really, really sick. And she caught on that I was sick, and I just kept telling her that I'm just car sick all the time. You know, I'd get in the car and I'd be sick, and I'm just car sick. And she didn't know any better. I mean, she had no idea that so she believed it, but just thought, man, this car sickness is really bad, And the minute that it took us a couple days to drive back from Texas after graduation. And literally the moment that we got into the house and I took her upstairs, and, Charlie and I told her about my diagnosis, and we had our little boohoo moment. And then I told her, I said, you have to swear you won't tell Mia, because Mia hasn't graduated yet. So Mia was going to graduate in another few weeks. So we had to keep the secret for another few weeks until Mia, was done with school. And then once Mia was done with school, then she came back and then told them. But, you just do what you have to do, because I just didn't want to be responsible for them not doing well in school.
Yeah. I'm curious. Did either of your daughters feel that you were they angry because you held back, or did they understand why you waited?
They 100% understood why I waited. In fact, they joke about it just because it's the Asian mom in me. It's nothing but good grades that I care about, Oh, well, it's the Asian mom. Of course you wouldn't tell us. So we get straight A's still, But they were not angry. I was actually afraid that they were going to be angry and upset with me, but 100% they understood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the tough part for me was how to break the news to the kids. Yeah. And the kids were out of the house. They're adults and out on their own, living their lives. And I really, really struggled with how I was going to break the news.
Yeah.
And I'll back up just a second. That pretty much from the get-go, after I was released from the hospital, I had started a blog in Caringbridge, just so we could send messaging out to multiple people at the same time instead of answering every single email, every single phone call. Not that we minded that, but that was also a platform for me to kind of explain the situation, and it helped me kind of collect my thoughts before speaking to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I wanted to do was tell them I was terminal. But I think it was calmer minds, things kind of calmed down in my own head there. Yes, I was stage 4, no doubt about that. But as I think explained in the blog, as well as to each of the kids individually on the phone, while stage 4 is obviously very, very serious and can be deadly, have an endpoint, it is not the same word as terminal. It doesn't necessarily 100% of the time mean you're terminal, you're going to die. At least not for, not in the immediate few years or so too. So, but obviously prognoses are not typically very good and all that too. So I tried to do my best in speaking with the kids as well as in the blog to lay out the fact that, yes, I'm stage 4. I'm not going to term myself as terminal, even though, that's what my physicians, when they write things up, it does say that in there.
Right.
But then again, prognoses are only numbers in my mind. At least I've convinced myself of that. If there's some percentage, small percentage that of survival rates, well, somebody's surviving, right? And why not me? And so it's kind of a pivot. I think what Linda Walters calls it a shift, I guess. And I position it that way, and it helps me to get through, and I hope it helped the kids. But they've been really tough troopers throughout all this stuff, and being supportive as well as all our friends stuff too.
And my sharing with family, I was with my husband when I got the call. I'm a speakerphone type person, so I always have my phone on speakerphone when it's a doctor or someone I'm waiting for like that. Usually because I forget everything when it's something important. So that way someone else at least hears it.
Right.
He was with me, and then I called my dad because we had been waiting on this phone call from the doctor. So I called my dad to tell him. My sister was en route to Colorado from Cleveland, and she was on a layover. And my dad actually decided to call her when she was all by herself in the airport.
Oh no!
On another flight, and told her. And I was like, "Why would you do this? She's coming here to see me." So I picked her up at the airport. She landed. And then that was, like I had mentioned earlier, leading into my birthday / bachelorette weekend.
Right.
And I honestly didn't tell my friends until like towards the end of the weekend. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I didn't want to, like, it was their vacation as well. And I didn't want to take away from the whole experience in terms of something super depressing and sad like that to hear. So I kind of kept it to myself. My sister knew. I think one of my friends that got there early knew. And then as, you know, we drank a little bit more, I think on Saturday, Sunday,
it came out.
It came out eventually.
Always helps.
Yeah. And then from there, though, like I kind of learned the first time around with cancer that it's too exhausting to tell every individual person. And like I have a lot of siblings and family members that are always checking in. So I kind of like assigned a point person, like my sister, she's a nurse, and she kind of was the point person if everyone had a bunch of questions. And then another little tip too, I open the text message from people until I'm ready to respond, because I noticed that I was so overwhelmed with messaging on my phone, and I was so grateful for everyone reaching out, but it gets very overwhelming. And that was something that either group text that you can have spread. I did also start a blog to help share information there with updates. But since I'd already been through it once, I kind of learned that it was very overwhelming for me to keep up with letting everyone else know what was going on when I barely knew. So,
Yeah, along those lines, do you guys have any other tips in terms of either telling family members, friends, kids, any other tips like that? Some things that you may have learned by doing it the hard way, Paige, like you said, you learned the first time around, things that people told you along the way, things that you, in hindsight, realize, I probably should have done it this way. Anything like that?
Well, I think one of the piece of advice I got from a relative who went through a serious cancer before too was don't get on Google. Just stay off the web. Don't do all the research. Don't get all the feedback from anybody and their mother out there. Although, I mean, I am guilty of using it, but only in kind of scientific websites and clinical trial type stuff and all that too, and trying to put some rationale to it. But I think in terms of trying to convey the bad news to people, I think just trying to get your head straight as best you can before speaking to them and sharing that news. I think that some sense of calmness will help them to see hopefully some positivity and hopefully extend some hope to everybody as well. I don't know.
I think, like Stud said, he uses Caring Bridge, and I also started using a Caring Bridge just because it's so much easier to disseminate the news that way, and people who want to follow you can follow you. It took me a while to do that because you sometimes feel like Caring Bridge is really only, I thought, only if your people are dying or something, so it's not for like, people who are just trying to give updates that for family and friends who care about you. But this way they can follow you, they can read your blog, and just most of the time now, they're kind of little boring little things that I post because thank goodness, it's, nothing big, which is great.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a great way to get your story out there without having to tell it 5 million times, and your friends that care about you want to know, and it's just a good way to do that. So,
agreed.
I've never heard of Caring Bridge until right now, actually.
Really?
So
I had a friend use it, and like you, Hazel, for a while it was kind of updates, but unfortunately it did become for her because she wasn't doing well. But it is a helpful way. And I don't think people who haven't gone through it understand how exhausting it is. They mean well. Everybody wants to know and know what they can do, but I don't think they realize the exhausting part. So I think that's a good way to.
It is, and
Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
mean, the other thing I would say about a blog like Karen Bridge, or I guess My Lifeline as well, is in addition to kind of giving people updates about yourself, for
Mhm.
me, and I don't know if it's, at least I try to believe that it's my calling to help educate people about cancer and try and help take some of the fear out of it, because
Yeah.
everybody, as we know, is going to be touched either directly or indirectly by cancer. And so by following my journey and putting my own
Mhm.
stud perspectives on things, hopefully lighten the mood a little bit, shown some hope, and educated people about the journey, and
I agree.
so
Yeah. If you happen to be watching and you have any questions, please feel free to type them in and we will get them up here and ask one of our panelists here. One question, I'm going to shift a little bit. I'm wondering if any of you have dealt with survivor's guilt, particularly when you consider that you are all stage 4. And I'm guessing that all of you may know someone who was even not stage 4 who has passed away. So I'm wondering if there's any kind of survivor guilt, and if so, like how have you approached that? How have you looked at that? Anything like that? Any of you?
I don't think I've experienced that. Everyone, I belong to a Facebook group that is for my particular mutation, so the ALK, ALK positive, it's called, and pretty much everybody's stage 4. I mean, I would say 99% is stage 4. So I don't know of anybody that has lung cancer with the mutation that I have that wasn't stage 4 when they were diagnosed. So I haven't really experienced that, any kind of survivor's guilt or anything like that. I feel like we're all kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, and I'm also on a Facebook support group for thymic carcinoma, and it's for people around the world. Even though, I mean, this is so rare, we still have, I don't know, a few 200 or 300 on the site, sharing their journeys and what they've tried and what has worked and what hasn't worked, and almost on at least a bi-weekly basis or so, somebody has passed on, a father, a husband, a person that was actually on this, communicating directly with us and all.
Right.
And I think a support group like that is extremely helpful to have some sense of that there is a community to support you, that you're not completely alone, even before or after someone has passed that's close to you. And I think, I still see husbands or spouses or kids of people that have passed come on the site and just say, keep going, unicorns. You guys are the best, and, appreciate everything you've done for us and support and all that too. And so I don't really feel any, guilt in that and survivorship in that way. I think it's just more a way of almost reverse support, I think. So.
I haven't really dealt with that either.
Okay. You've all mentioned this in little ways, but I want to ask point blank, how has this changed your life in terms of your perspective, in terms of your day-to-day activities, in terms of goals, in terms of maybe a life philosophy? How has being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer changed your life?
Well, for me, I'll just jump on in there. As I mentioned earlier, we've always traveled around the world and all, but obviously we've ramped things up, not knowing what the future has been like. Doesn't come without an expense, because now we have to plug in some extra money for travel insurance nowadays, and it has come in handy, with or without pandemic stuff, right?
Interesting.
But it's also, you don't take any day for granted. Enjoy every day that's been given to you, and don't sweat the little things. It's just not worth it anymore. There are whole bigger fish to fry, and I think the three of us can attest to that, and you too, Gail. Just enjoying the quality of life, that I've got, and just appreciating it and just trying to be around all the people I want to be around as well, and do the things I want to do within reason.
Yeah, definitely.
You're no longer guaranteed that tomorrow's, you always push things off. Oh, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that next week. I'll do that next year. Those are not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed for anybody. I understand that.
Right.
I mean, anybody doesn't have that guarantee, but especially when you've been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Right.
So you do appreciate every day, and you just go out and do things that you want to do. And it's funny. I know that Paige had said that she changed her diet and is really clean, and I just kind of went the total opposite. And I just I've got stage 4. I'm just going to eat whatever I want, and I really don't restrict myself. I've always had a sweet tooth. I continue to have, to eat things, and I don't limit my red meat. I don't do anything. I mean, I am from the philosophy, everything in moderation. So I truly believe that. And I mean, there were days where I was feeling so gross and sick that truly all I could eat was cookies. And, I ate cookies 3 times a day for months,
You do have a sweet tooth. Oh my goodness.
That's the only thing that would make me feel good, was to have a couple chocolate chip cookies, and you do what you got to do. So I just kind of went total opposite and just thought, you know what, just going to eat whatever I want and not worry about it, and everything in moderation. So.
And I totally agree with that. I actually like to think of it more as eating mindfully and not like diets or restrictions or guilt or anything like that. Yeah. Because if I want a donut, and especially during quarantine, like I've been eating things because what else do we have to do besides eat good food? But I totally agree. So I try to think of it like, if I eat throughout the day, like a lot of vegetables and healthy foods, and then I want to have a piece of cake or something, like no problem. But it just, in terms of my cancer is fed by estrogen, and that's why I've kind of changed ways to, I stopped eating dairy and things like that. And nothing is proven or anything like that it helps, but it's just something that helps me, and my body feels a lot better than it used to. So I'd say the diet and lifestyle is a huge one. I've switched to like clean, sunscreens and hair products and things like that I didn't even know about all the stuff and everything that I was using before. So I've definitely educated myself in a lot of different areas that I just didn't know anything about before. And then I've definitely have switched over to kind of a more spontaneous lifestyle, where like when I actually got the call for camp, it was because there was a last minute cancellation for Epic. And I think it was like 2 weeks before, and I got the email from Mama Lou, and I was just like, you know what, nothing's on my agenda that week, so I'm going to do it. And I just started kind of living that day to day, where like, if something sounded good, like why not do it? Just because when will I be able to do it again? So like that was a big thing with traveling. And now that that's kind of stopped, now I just moved to the mountains very last minute, unplanned, and all of that. So I think the spontaneity, and it just keeps life a little bit more exciting too.
Yeah. That's awesome. We have a question from Chris Taylor, and I just, how long have you each had cancer? And I know, Paige, you said the first time you were diagnosed was
January of 2016. So it's like 4 to 4.5 years since the first time. And then since I turned metastatic stage 4, it has been about just a little over 2 years.
Okay. And instead, you said
4.5 years, January of 16.
Okay. And 6 years for you, Hazel, is that right?
Yep.
You guys you're doing, this is awesome. You're all awesome. I'm wondering if there was one event, and I think, again, some of you kind of answered this, but is there one event, something that someone said, something that someone wrote, something you read somewhere, another survivor, that kind of changed your outlook on your diagnosis? If you were kind of looking at it one way, whether it was negatively or more fearfully or more whatever, is there anything that was kind of a turning point for you along the way?
Truthfully, and I said this at the beginning, Epic experience, I was only 3 months out of diagnosis, and I could barely say the words, I have cancer. I mean, whenever I would say that, I'd just start bawling, and I could never finish the sentence. And so I just thought, I just need to try and, do something to get beyond that. And truly, I was at the doctor's office, and this social worker came up and said, it was one of those perks that you get when you have cancer. You get all these little, get to go to camp,
Right.
you have this and this and this you can go to. So, she had mentioned Epic Experience. So I actually went online and looked it up, and I'm a real outdoorsy person. So I thought, you know what, this is kind of right up my alley, and it's free. So that was even better.
Right.
And so I went and almost pulled out right the day of, because I just didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. And my family just kind of said, no, you need to go. And I went, and there was a ton of crying at camp. I think I cried every single day, but I think it was kind of a catharsis for me, just to be able to get to the point where I was accepting my cancer, and I could actually tell people I had cancer. I mean, everybody there has cancer, of course, but just to be able to talk to people about, and nothing was off, nothing was off limits as far as, I mean, you could tell somebody that, oh my God, I had the worst diarrhea. Nobody would even deny it. It'd be like, oh my God, I've had really bad diarrhea too. I mean, nothing was off limits. And everybody, it didn't matter if you had breast cancer or lung cancer or pancreas. It doesn't matter what kind of cancer. Everybody was walking the walk, and everybody totally understood what you were saying when you were talking about it. And it was this sense of belonging. And just to that whole week, it just changed my perspective of myself. And just, you know what, it just made me feel like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
I've got cancer, but I can do this. I'm not gonna let this take me down. Yeah. And truly, my family, you asked them, and when I came back, they said, wow, you've changed, because I was kind of down in the dark place and thinking about death and dying all the time, and just sad. But when I came back, it was just, I felt happy and just wanted to start living again. Yeah. And so that truly was my turning point.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think mine was probably, I had signed up for yoga teacher training before my metastatic diagnosis came in, and it was a month-long intensive, and it was something that I wanted to do for a really long time, like years before all this. But I had finally committed to it, signed up for it, and then this all happened. I wasn't sure. I moved back to Cleveland. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to go to this program in Denver that I had hoped to go to. And then my doctors, everything was fine. I was able to go. So we moved 6 times that year. And one of them was back to Denver. We were living out of a storage unit in our Honda CRV for a while. We had apartments, but the majority of our belongings were in storage. And we actually road tripped back, got here the day before the training started. And it kind of reminded me of 30 days of intense therapy.
Wow.
My first day of training, I actually found a lump on my healthy breast, and it was actually the implant that they put in there. But the first day of training at 6 a.m., I got up really early, and it was almost like a reminder for me when I figured out a week later that it was just the implant and everything was totally fine. But my mind went right away to all the bad things that it could be. I just was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, of course. But I think those 30 days, being able, it was the first time, I was diagnosed at the end of February, and this training was June. So June 1st it started, and it was just a few months after. But it was the first time that I was able to not think about my cancer all day, every day. I would go here, and I had just gotten out of radiation. I had done radiation, so I was just on new drugs and chemos and things like that. So my body wasn't 100% by any means, and that was probably something that would have discouraged most people from doing it. But a lot of the time I would just sit there and picture myself doing the things. And I think that throughout that month-long program, I think that it helped me like learn my own anatomy and realize that like there are tools that I can use to help my body heal, whether, you know, I think that it's helping or you know, what people tell me isn't necessarily the case. It was kind of like throughout that process that I felt very supported and very comfortable there, where I could cry if I need to. And it was just a really amazing experience that I think that after that, I kind of had a different outlook on things.
Yeah. Awesome.
And for me, I mean, I can't pin it down to just one turning point. It's almost a kind of a three-pronged approach for me. One I mentioned earlier, you know, finding my faith again. So spiritually kind of helped take care of me there. And then later in that year, I think it was September of 16, I actually attended an international medical symposium on thymus cancers and thymic carcinoma particularly. So people from Japan and Italy and China were a lot of the research being done. And so I think from that standpoint, seeing all the research that's being done kind of helped me from a academic standpoint, you know, knowing that things were actually being done. It wasn't hopeless. Really just a matter of time trying to, you know, wait out the technology. And then the third thing is basically what Hazel said. It was epic. So the following year when I went there, you know, I don't think I realized I needed it. But like Hazel, there were a lot of tears that kind of repressed emotions and thoughts, I guess, all of a sudden kind of came boiling out. And so I think from a psychosocial standpoint, that's where Epic, you know, took care of me in that way. So again, you know, spiritually, academically, and then psychosocially, I mean, those all kind of help me take pieces of me and put it back together. So
yeah, definitely. Well, I'm going to ask you all one more question. Thank you so much for sharing. But I want to see if we can help anybody who might be listening who is in the position that you were in when you were diagnosed. So I'm wondering if you have any advice, maybe something you wish you would have known back then when you were diagnosed with stage 4, or if you had an opportunity to talk to somebody, you know, who's just been diagnosed. Is there anything you would share? Not necessarily a tip, anything that you have found has been particularly helpful that might be a way to help someone who's just been diagnosed.
Well, I think with lung cancer in particular, the statistics for lung cancer are so old that because the targeted therapy out there has not been around for 10 years, and so they don't have these new numbers. And so it is 100% natural to want to go to Dr. Google. I did. And of course, that was the worst thing to do. Yeah. I'm a nurse and I still use Dr. Google. And it was awful because it was pretty doom and gloom. But I think the advice is that just know that those, you know, those numbers a lot of times are old. And when if somebody were to give you a prognosis, it's just a number. Like Stud said, you know, there has to always be a poster child. Why can't it be you? I mean, you know, there are people that are dying really early in their diagnosis, and then people who are still surviving decades on, and you just can't believe it. Like, oh my gosh, why is this person still alive? Well, why can't you be that person? You know, so take your prognosis. It is just a number. It doesn't define you. It doesn't define your life, and just be careful with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I agree 100% with what Hazel said. You know, you're going to go. Everybody's going to go through the grief process, you know, the 5 steps there, and you've got to get through that. I mean, it's just healthy. And then just try to find some way to find some normalcy in your life. Stay as active as you can, you know, and to the best of your ability. And don't take anything for granted. And just like I mentioned earlier, don't sweat the small stuff. Just live it and don't have no regrets.
Yeah.
And there is hope. There is hope.
I agree with all of that. Hope being super important, as I explained earlier. I would say I know like from my metastatic, when I metastasized and I was waiting from the PET scan to actually meet with the oncologist, that was the time when I wanted to be Googling things. So I would definitely recommend, you know, if you need to look something up, maybe something small, but for like 3 weeks, I couldn't see an oncologist from that diagnosis. And it was a really hard thing to not look that stuff up, especially hearing, you know, you probably have about 3 years left, you know, happy 28th birthday, 3 years to go. But I don't believe that now, obviously. It's not the truth. And the same that both of them have said that the statistics are it's just a number. It's not your story. It's someone else's journey. And that might be hopefully very different than yours. But I think that the time in between, that's when you would want to Google everything before you have the chance to ask your doctor all those questions. And maybe a better thing to do besides that is to just jot all the questions that you have down that you come across. If your family members ask you questions, I always have a notebook and I bring it to the appointments with me. Even with my normal follow-up appointments, I'm constantly bringing my agenda and jotting stuff down. But instead of Googling all the questions, maybe Google something very general that you want to learn about, or something that can actually be solid proof of it, not just like, you know, statistics. But then to keep that hope and, you know, just do what you can to take care of your body, because it's the only one we have.
Definitely. Thank you all so much. If you have recently been diagnosed, if you're watching this and you have been diagnosed, you can reach out to Epi Experience and we can connect you with resources, whether it's something related to your specific cancer or if you're just looking for a support group. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we are not having Epic camps this summer. But one thing we are doing is we're having a virtual camp. So if you might be interested in that, you can go to the Epic Experience website and apply. It's going to be a week-long thing for a certain period of time during the day, and we'll do some of the fun activities. So it's not quite the same as being a camp, which is the most awesome thing ever, but it will be still a lot of fun because there'll be still some of the activities. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Epic Experience. Otherwise, you three, thank you. I appreciate you so much, and we hope you have all a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye.